Hi everybody. In this video demonstration, I'm going to be walking you through how to create a design that will go all the way around your cube. We will be focusing on the principles of design, pattern, and rhythm. Now you don't have to use both. You can choose one or the other, or you can just stick with all pattern, all rhythm. It's completely up to you. However, you will be using the elements of art to create these principles of design. Now, you've done this before in our previous handouts where you created a visual example for the the principles of design. And you're just going to do that again, but this time, this will be the design that you use on the side of your cubes. It's kind of like a math problem. You're going to pick one or two of the elements, you're going to add them together, and that will create the principle. So if we look at the principle of pattern, it's a combination of elements or shapes repeated in a recurring and regular arrangement. Rhythm is a combination of elements repeated but with variations. So think of a moving pattern. Regular pattern just stands still, while rhythm creates movement. Like I said before, this is like taking one or two of the elements, adding them together, and then creating the principle. So it's a very easy equation, and I'm going to show you how to do this and how to create this for a sculptural design. So on this piece of paper, I've given you three different options. You will be able to design out three possible options for your cube. You will want to do this so that you have a backup option in case your first option doesn't work. And also, you're going to want to use this plan to help you along the way. Having a plan keeps your ideas clear, and it helps you stay focused on what you want to create. If you're working without a plan, it's very easy to go off track. I will be checking all throughout the building process to make sure that you have your design in front of you and that you are working from it. Sometimes if you decide that you don't need to work from your plan, that's where problems can arise and things can go a little bit off track. So you'll always want to have your design in front of you when you are creating your projects. Now I've started to draw my first idea, and I'm going to be creating rhythm for this one. Rhythm can be a little bit complicated for some people because it's not just a still pattern, it's a moving pattern. So for this one, I wanted to create an orchid flower. And if you know what orchids look like, they have really thin, long stems, and the flowers tend to bloom at the ends. They also have little round buds that grow close to the flowers and will eventually open as well. So right now I'm using line and shape to create the design. I'm repeating this all throughout every single tile. So if you look at each square, you can think of that like a side of your cube. So as it is right now, each of my cube sides will all look the same. There might be some instances where one of the sides of your cube may look different from the other. So for example, let's say you have the very first square and you have one really large flower on that square, and the rest of the squares look like my three that I created. That first square would be an area of emphasis because that's where your eye is going to go first, but it's still part of your pattern. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just labeling the elements that I used. So I used line, shape, and I'm going to add some texture to create the movement for rhythm. So I'm going to make these really thin lines that look like the wind blowing behind my flower. And now it looks like the flower is being blown by the wind. And this is creating a sense of movement, which equals rhythm. For my second design, I'm going to pick something that's a little less complicated, and I'm going to create pattern using line, shape, and color. Now you want to give yourself some options. Maybe give yourself a design that's kind of difficult, maybe one that's not so difficult, and maybe one that's really easy. This will give you a couple ideas to choose from, and it will also give you a backup plan in case you get stuck along the way. So for this design, I am going to create a polka dot pattern. So I'm using line because all of my circles go in a line, and the circles are shapes, and then each of my lines will change with the color. So maybe I'll have a solid colored background, and each row of circles will be different. For my final design, I'm going to use texture, color, and shape. I'm again going to be creating a still pattern. So these last two are a little bit simpler and they're not using rhythm. So I'm going to use a technique that you may have learned last semester. This is called stippling, where I make little tiny dots using my pencil or a pen. And I could also say that I'm using the element of value because the dots that I'm creating are going darker at the bottom where they're denser, and they're getting lighter as it moves to the top. So along with texture, shape, and color, I've also added an additional element of value. Now this design is a little bit more complex because I'll have to add these little dots to every single side of my cube, and I'll have to be very careful when I apply them with the glaze because it's going to go from dark to light, and I don't want it to look like it's all one color. I still want to be able to see the little dots. So this one would be a fairly complex design, but not as complex as my very first design, since I will be applying the circles using only glaze, and in my first design I'll actually be creating a raised design. I'll be rolling coils and applying those to the side, so that one would be my most complex. And sometimes a very simple design is often the best design. It's called less is more. When you decide to add a lot of elements to try to include every single one on your project, sometimes your project can be a little bit overwhelmed by everything that's on it. We want to keep our design simple. That's why I said you can pick maybe 2 to 3 elements, sometimes 4. That way you have a more simple design that is creating unity in your project. Now I don't want my design to just be the stippled dots. I know that I want to add something a little extra to this and really take my pattern to the next level. I could very easily leave just these dots creating value going from the bottom to the top, but I want something to be raised on my cube. I don't want it to be all flat. So after I've applied all my stippled little dots for my design, I'm going to go back and I'm going to add 3 stars to each side. I want it to kind of look like a space design, where there's stars in space, some are bigger than others, some stand out more. That's the design I'm going for with this. So as you can see from all of my squares, they're all the same. The pattern repeats. I'm using texture, line, shape, or excuse me, not line, texture, shape, and value to create this pattern. Now that I have all 3 design options to choose from, I'm going to pick my favorite, and that's going to be my final design concept. So on the back page, I'm really going to draft out and spend more time on the details of my plan. The more detailed your plan, the easier it is to build your project. So I'm going to select one from my first 3 options. So I've selected the stars, and now I'm going to draw that for my final concept, but I want to draw this in a three-dimensional form so I can visualize what it's going to look like. So in order to do that, I'm going to start by drawing a vertical line off to the left of my paper. I'm going to add 2 lines to the right side. Then I'm going to do the same thing to the opposite side. I'm going to, again, draw another line and then connect everything. This is how you can draw a 3-dimensional cube on a 2-dimensional surface. So this is the inside of my cube. So it's like I'm looking at my cube from above. Now I can go back and erase any of the lines that went over, and I'm going to apply my design to the sides of my 3-dimensional cube. This way I'll be able to kind of see what it's going to look like. You can work through your design process and figure out if this is the best design to pick before you start building. I'm also going to want to include a side view of my lid with the handle and a top view of my lid. And now I'm going to apply my design to the cube and see what it looks like. So again, I'm using the stippling effect to create the dots along the side. And I want to make sure that I have more dots at the bottom than I do at the top, creating value. Now when you create a handle for your lid, you want to make sure that that also goes along with your design. So I know that I have 3 stars on each side of my cube, and I want to create a lid or a handle that goes with that. So I could pick a circle, which is kind of plain. I could maybe create a square, but I think I'm going to push my design to the next level and I'm going to create a star handle. So after I've applied my design to the side of my cube to see what it looks like, I'm going to draft up my handle. Now at this point, as you start to apply the design, let's say you don't really like how it's turning out. It's very easy to just erase it and apply the next design. So maybe design 1 or design 2. If one of those ends up working better, then you won't have all the trouble of creating a cube, applying the design, having to start all over again. You can work out those problems here first before moving on to the building process. So this does save you a little bit of time as well. This is why your plan is so important. Now I'm going to add the stars to the side, and I'm going to change my design a little bit. On the previous design, I had them all going the same direction. But I think I'm going to mix it up a little bit, and I'm going to kind of have them create like a V shape. So they're going to alternate with each turn. So you can see already when drafting up my final design that I've already made a few changes. This is the place where you want to make those changes. You don't want to make those changes halfway through the building process. Now I'm drawing a top view of what my handle is going to look like. And it may not necessarily look exactly like a star right now, but I'll also include a side view so I know what it looks like. This top view shows me that my handle is going to be 3-dimensional and it's going to be like a slab shape. So it's going to be about a 1/4 inch thick. And it's going to be the top of the star that I can see on the top view. But from the side view, I can see exactly what the side will look like. And now everything goes together. So in this draft, I only have 2 of my sides, But I know that the other two sides are going to follow the rule of pattern, which means they're going to repeat. So I don't necessarily have to turn it around and draw the other side as well. Having the two sides completed is enough to give me the information that I need to see what my design will look like. It's very important to work through all of your design details here in your draft so that when you submit your plan for approval, all you have to focus on is the building and applying. And I'll be showing you how to build your cube and attach all of the slabs together in the next demonstrations.